All right. Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy. I'm back here with my co-hosts, Matty B and Rick David. We're going to start with high tempo, go through a bunch of topics. But before that, I want to remind everyone to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We're S-Bound Sports on Twitter and Southbound Sports on Facebook and Instagram. Jeff, he hosts Spaces or Laces. He's an older co-host of this show. He's not able to be on it currently because of work requirements, but he's been putting out a lot of great content. I'm starting to post stuff. I've been renovating my new studio, so that's going to be going up. I posted a picture on there today, so follow us on there for any updates. And I was at a conference on basically data computer stuff, and I have some really cool stuff coming soon for the site, so follow us so you can check that out. If you're a fan of football, it's going to start with football, and we're going to be doing a lot of statistics, data stuff. And if you play fantasy football, we'll be giving tips on that. I know we did that at the beginning of the football season, but we're going to be getting back into that a little bit more. But to start off the show, we're going to go through high tempo. Give me your topic of the week. Let's start with you, Rick.
I just want to talk about the Pirates having no clue in management still to this day. Drew Hutchinson, who was supposed to be this reclamation project, we don't need minor league prospects. We got Drew Hutchinson. He decides earlier this week that he's going to be a minor league free agent. He's not coming back to the Pirates. So it proves to me two things. One, Pirate front management lied to us in that trade because he didn't even last a year with us. It was a little bit less than that when you count them all the months. He didn't make out. He wasn't a good pitcher. Lied to us. It was about financial flexibility. We didn't spend that money anyway. So don't look forward to big free agent. Secondly, it proves to me that Ray Surge isn't as good as he is proclaimed to be in Pittsburgh. There was a gentleman by the last name of Benedict. He is one of the guys, and they said as soon as they lost him, they were going to lose some of their pitching skills, and they did. Their ERA, every starting pitcher, was above a 4 last year. So proves to me that this is, and proves to me that we just wasted 2 minor league prospects. We traded away Liriano. Liriano is playing in the World Series, so he's a part of the Astros 25-man roster. So funny how things work out. So we have Liriano and Charlie Morton versus Tony Watson. So good luck to those guys.
All right. Matt, what about you this week?
Actually, this is in Pennsylvania, the last regular season week for high school football. So those teams are getting ready for their playoff runs. I was a little bit excited that our team here is prepared for a playoff run. It's just a matter of, with this last game, that will help shake out what the final seedings are going to be come playoffs next week.
Cool. Mine is also going to be on high school sports. Down here in Raleigh, they had a student who I think he got knocked out, possibly broke his neck in a game. It's been covered in the news a couple times, but I've got conflicting news, so I don't want to get into the details before they really come out. I know it happened like last week or something, but make sure your safety is your first priority when you're out there playing sports. I know they're going to throw around, it's a football injury. Injuries are only caused in football. That's not true. Freak things happen, accidents happen. Just make sure that you're following the rules, procedures that are set forth by your coaches and everything. And this is for all the high school athletes and everyone out there. Put the gear on correctly. Don't wear it just because it looks like it's cool, or maybe an NFL player doesn't wear knee pads or whatever, anything like that. They might wear their helmets loose. Don't do that. Wear it for safety first, and you can worry about looking cool whenever you're celebrating a victory after the game. So I just wanted to touch base on that. Going into our first topic of the week, the World Series. World Series is up. I know we talked about it. My angle was that they were going to try to get the 2 biggest markets in there. And now I'm on a different conspiracy theory. Right now, Houston made the World Series. They are recovering from a hurricane. I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this. What do you think about Houston winning the World Series, similar to how the New Orleans Saints won the Super Bowl after they had their hurricane disaster? Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't buy into the whole conspiracy theory thing. For me, one of the things that I look at with that is they went out and got players. When you get, to me, I've been a Verlander fan. You go out and you get one of the best pitchers in baseball. It's amazing how you go out and get good players, and then you start winning games to go hand in hand with that. It's no surprise there. When you go out and you acquire the pieces that you need to make a championship run, and kudos to the Astros for doing that. You know, they knew what they needed to get. They were willing to go out on a limb and say, you know, this could be a team that could take us to the World Series this year. They went out and got the guys, and now you're seeing the benefits of that. You know, on the other side, being this close to Pittsburgh, you see that every year they're like, well, we're close. We're close. Just keep coming to the ballpark, and it just turns into a financial thing.
We talked about that this year because normally on the Pirate side of things, they're always talking about jettisoning players or getting rid of them or cutting contracts. Maybe they'll make a move, but it has to make sense financially instead of making the move to take that next step and actually win some games, whether it be in the playoffs or the World Series or anything like that, because they were close. Oh, I don't even know how many years ago that was now. 4 years? Seems like a lifetime that they had that one blip in the radar after 20 years of not making the playoffs, that they looked like they could make a run. Heartbreaking loss. And now every year, yeah, you have to make that move. Houston, they went from worst to, I don't want to say first unless they win the World Series, but they went ahead. They did a complete rebuild. I think Rick mentioned it last week or the week before about how they rebuilt their whole minor league system from the ground up and now have a foundation where they're in the World Series. They went ahead, got some veteran players, brought them in for that run, and now it's looking like they're facing the Dodgers, who have been a juggernaut all year. You can throw away that losing streak that they had in the middle of the year. Every team goes through losing streaks. The one thing you want right now is a winning streak in the playoffs so that you can advance. I think it's going to be a great series. It's 1-1 right now, whenever we started the show. And Rick, what are your thoughts on the World Series matchup?
I'm still favoring the Astros overall. I think they have the better team put together. Little side note here. I was very disappointed earlier today when I heard that Adrian Gonzalez was no-showing the World Series. Well, on the 40-man roster, he is injured. He wasn't going to play the series anyway. No-showing it because he wanted to go on a family vacation to Europe. Doesn't make any sense. You can go next week. Christmas is a good time. Thanksgiving. Pretty much 2018. Because you may not be playing. You may be retired. Because nobody wants to pick up your contract because Bellinger's better than you. So I don't understand that at all. Kind of weird. He's one of their clubhouse leaders. I love that terminology now, clubhouse leaders. But yet he's going to go play. He's going to go on the family vacation in Europe. So I guess he got a great flight. Maybe he did Expedia, got that. But, I mean, for the Astros, they came up and they taught it right. They did something that other teams are now mocking or kind of doing something along those lines. You've seen the Brewers do it. You've seen the Reds do it. You've seen the Pirates do it. Mets are doing it to a certain extent. And the Phillies have done it too. They're blowing up their rosters, trying to build within. The thing with the Astros is they figured out their core quickly. And, they knew Altuve was a guy to build around. They knew Dallas was a guy to build around. They knew they needed some pieces. They traded for Ken Giles. They didn't have a closer really in the system. They knew they needed a first baseman in a hurry. They went and got Griel, the Cuban prospect. And they got Bregman, a former first-round pick, flew up through the system. Correa, Springer flew up through their system because they had that talent. And you got weird guys that you wouldn't even think of. Cameron Maybin was released earlier this year on their roster trying to make a run. I mean, some other guys. Brian McCann was traded for 2 prospects, never to be heard from again. Evan Gattis was a part of the fire sale, a part of the Braves system. I mean, you went out. Charlie Morton was a recommendation based upon a trainer to go for them to sign. And he pitches Game 7 and pitches unbelievable. And I mean, Liriano was another money dump, and they're using him out of the bullpen as a long reliever. I mean, finding guys and finding value in them and figuring out how to use them is something Astros can do and other teams wish they can do. Reds tried it. You look at what they did bad. They got nothing in that pitching staff that looks like a pitching staff right now. That's pretty much garbage they're throwing out there on a daily basis. They tried playing Bronson Arroyo, who's like 42, and tried pitching him out there this year because they couldn't figure out how to develop a minor league pitching staff. So I give Houston the credit. I think they have a good team, and I think A.J. Hinch is an underrated manager too. So it's always weird. You can find those catchers that become managers, and they do have success. Girardi, Scioscia, to a certain extent. So Scioscia has a World Series. Joe Torre as well. So, I mean, catchers that become managers.
That's a good insight, and I think that's because catchers are involved in every play of the game. So they're there no matter, they don't get the days off like some pitchers do, or starting pitchers would. They only pitch one a week. Most catchers play throughout the week and only take off for maybe one or two starters. So it makes sense that they're going to make good managers because they're used to managing the game from behind the plate. Now, with that, yeah, they saw a core group of players and they built around it, and now it's going to be something that Houston can ride into the future. I think you saw the Dodgers do that a few years ago, had some great success with Puig and some of the other rookies that they brought up in their own system. And so it's going to be interesting to see how close they're going to get. They also put out that the Cubs fired one of their pitching coaches, which to me doesn't make sense. They just won the first World Series in like over 100 years, and you're going to fire the pitching coach that got you that championship? Come on. Give the guy at least some time. It's baseball. There's 162 games. You win it for the first time in hundreds of years. Keep the guy around. I felt bad for that guy because he's like a scapegoat for the playoff loss. Go ahead, Rick.
It was Chris Bosio that was fired. It's an inside job here, kind of what's happening. Jim Hickey said he was no longer going back to Tampa Bay. Where did Joe Madden come from? Tampa Bay. He's bringing him on. It just hasn't been official. Paperwork isn't signed. But the writing was on the wall there. The funny thing also add about the Cubs is Eric Hinsky was their hitting coach. He's gone. He went to the Angels. Angels need something. They can't hit outside of Trout and Pujols. They need something to help that out. And now they're going to possibly lose Dave Martinez because he's interviewing for some of the the manager jobs that are still out there. And that goes your bench coach. So the coaching staff has completely changed in Chicago. And the Giants, who were winning every other year, pretty much everybody's gone in Bochy's staff right now. Either got fired, reassigned, or has left the organization. So really weird there. I don't understand all these coaching changes this year. It's really weird so far.
It's funny that you brought up Pujols. Whenever one of your best hitters is that old, I think we should have an award on the show, like the Julio Franco, the best vet in the league. Who's the best old guy that's going to bring that type of clout to your team where you know he can be a pinch hitter in his 40s? Because I think that's something that Pujols could do. The Angels are in the AL, so he could potentially be the DH forever. That's something that Barry Bonds tried to do, and no team would take a bite at it. I think he still would have been awesome into his mid-40s, kind of like the Tom Brady thing. As long as you're working out and you're healthy, you're not going to have an ankle turned, really fielding a ball or taking a bad bounce or something like that. So DH is perfect to just extend your career into oblivion. So I'm going to look into that, looking to see who the oldest guy is that has the best batting average. I don't know how I'll figure that out, but that's something I'm going to bring back on the show. And I'll use that as a segue now into college football. I put the topics first because there was a pretty big week of college football. I think the most impressive win to me was Notre Dame over USC. I've been saying all year that Notre Dame, or actually USC's been overrated. And I really liked that Notre Dame-Georgia matchup early in the year, but I wasn't sure because you saw last year with the Notre Dame-Texas game. Everyone overhyped it. It was like the first or second week. It might have been the Labor Day game. Everyone was saying Notre Dame and Texas are back, and then they proceeded to choke the rest of the season away. Now this year, USC's been doing everything they can to lose games. Almost lost to Texas, almost lost to some of these other teams. They lose to Washington State, and Coach Mike Leach, who I want to give a shout out to because he had a bounce back week. They're 7-1 now, and still in the hunt for that Pac-12 championship. But Notre Dame is in a position now where they're looking like they can steal one of the Power 5, maybe not the playoff bid, but they can go ahead and jump and take one of the BCS bowl games. I know I've riffed with Matt on this off camera, off the show, a bunch of times making fun of the deal the ACC signed with Notre Dame. So this is kind of our pseudo ACC topic of the week. Notre Dame has a clause in their conference affiliation with the ACC that they can take their bowl bid. I want to say every conference is tied into a game. You have the Pac-12, they're tied in with the Rose Bowl. The Big Ten's tied in with the Rose Bowl with them. So their champions, if they're not in the playoffs, they're going to meet in that bowl game unless there's like a rotation system where that bowl might change if it's in the playoffs or something. I want to say the Orange Bowl is the ACC's bowl. Florida State played in it last year against Michigan. I think was an at-large was how they got that tie-in. So this year, if Notre Dame's sitting there, and let's say Clemson wins or whatever, Notre Dame could take that bid away from an undefeated, or I guess they wouldn't be undefeated if they lost to Clemson, but you might have a one-loss Miami sitting there against a 1 or 2-loss Notre Dame. And this might be the first time that we've ever seen this happen. And when it happened in the Big East, it started to happen for a few years. The Big East fell apart after that because they're not going to be splitting that bowl revenue. You get so many from the playoffs. You get like $15 million a year for the conference with the playoffs. You also get like 10 or 12 million from that bowl game. That money, if Notre Dame is in it, they're going to take that money themselves. So, Matt, you're an ACC guy, Florida State guy. Tough year for them. I think we both know what it feels like whenever you lose your starting quarterback and your team just seems to be drowning. But what are your thoughts on Notre Dame and the position they're in here late in the season?
Well, I think when you're looking at the playoff, I think a lot of like the people at the bigger media sports and outlets are looking for trying to figure out ways to get 2 SEC schools, because I think that in most people's eyes, the popular consensus is that the best football is being played in the SEC because of the Alabama bias. If Michigan or if Notre Dame and Georgia continue to win their games, even if Georgia's other loss comes to Alabama in the SEC championship, if Notre Dame continues to win and that the loss looks better to the committee's eyes, there's a distinct possibility that they could allow Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, and then pin the tail on the donkey for the fourth team in. So that could leave the door open for that to happen. Now, as far as Notre Dame taking that bid, if they're playing well, the argument that I always said was if they take that bowl bid from, and I'll just use this as a hypothetical, take it from NC State, because as of right now, they're a possible contender for the ACC championship. Sitting in the Atlantic right now, they're 5-1, 6-1. They're 4-0 in the conference. If there's a distinct possibility that if the cards fall where they may, they could end up being the Atlantic winner, facing a Miami or Georgia Tech or even Virginia Tech from the coastal side, that they win the ACC championship. There's no reason why they couldn't possibly contend for one of those playoff spots. But I think that it would be a shame if a team with a better record gets left out. I think NC State, if they win the ACC and then they're jumped by Notre Dame, I think that's going to be a major flaw in the way that they're selecting their bowls, because in the past they're looking at, well, what's your strength of schedule like, and who's your conference champion? If you're not playing for a conference championship, then what's your criteria for justifying that win over something else? And I think the NCAA has kind of kicked the can on that one, because they really haven't had to address the issue. I think they're going to wait for it to play out. And if this season continues to be the roller coaster that it is, it could really open the door for allowing, to go from 4 to 8 teams and make things a little bit more interesting come bowl season in the future.
Well, I was looking at that, and I think the reason I went with Clemson over NC State is NC State travels to Notre Dame this weekend. So I think that's going to resolve itself. If NC State loses, even if they win the ACC, Notre Dame's gonna jump them because they're gonna justify it by saying they won head to head, even if it's at home. I mean, especially if they win in convincing fashion. They'll just say the ACC's down this year. Florida State lost Francois. Clemson's having troubles with a new quarterback. They just don't deserve to be in. Notre Dame's going to get that jump. I also don't think they're going to take both Georgia and Notre Dame. If they make all the teams from one conference in an independent, I don't know how the payouts work with Notre Dame. But I thought like your conference had to be in the playoffs to get a payout. If it's like other bowls, it might not be. There might be some other agreement where the conferences take a certain amount each year. But you would have to imagine that playoff is expanding sooner rather than later. If the Big 12 has been left out countless times, the Pac-12, and in that scenario, I would say the Big 10 would be in. They look the strongest right now. So you'd have the Pac-12 and the Big 12 out. You could take your pick which Big Ten team makes it, whether they're fourth or third or second if Penn State stays up there, which we'll get to Penn State here in a second. I just don't see how the playoff, the committee has to be shitting themselves right now because they're in a position where it's looking like Georgia, they have a 1-point victory over Notre Dame. So if they kick Notre Dame out, you're going to have Notre Dame's a national brand. So if Georgia loses to Alabama, you're potentially going to have a one-loss Georgia, which looks like it might be against a one-loss Notre Dame, and then the conference champions, where at that point, the fourth team, Notre Dame crushed USC, so they're going to jump them. They're going to have some conundrum on their hands. Do they put in potentially, TCU could still go undefeated. At that point, then who are you leaving out? I don't want to leave TCU out. They've looked dominating. And I did want to mention, TCU held Kansas to 21 yards in the game. It's like the lowest yard total of like all time in recent memory. I mean, if you go back to like the leather helmets possibly, but 21 yards, that's pathetic for a conference team. Think about Rutgers. Everyone makes fun of Rutgers. Rutgers just transitioned into that top tier status. They haven't even been held to 21 yards. And they've been playing dominating defenses. So it's crazy that Kansas just gets belted by TCU. They're looking like they're going to be a strong playoff case. I think the committee wants teams to kind of win so it figures themselves out. It's happened the past couple of years. They don't want that conversation about the playoff expanding. Mike Leach has already started in on it. And go ahead and search for Mike Leach in the playoffs. He's saying that they should expand to 16 at least because that gives it a fair chance for going, and he said he thinks that it would work with even 32 teams or 64 teams. And his rationale is, and I kind of agree with him, and for years I never would have said that have this many teams in the playoff, but his rationale is if you cut the regular season to 10 games and then you start the playoffs at 64, you're going to have less games overall, so you're cutting down on injuries. You're not playing 12, 13 regular season games that every team plays. So every team's only playing 10. That's cutting out 2 or 3 games a year. And then you have the playoffs and everybody can be in. Get rid of these crappy bowl games that people travel to. Those used to be a reward. Now they are just a corporate commercial for weird products that kind of like they rotate, it seems like every year. You don't know who's going to sponsor a bowl game. So get rid of them. Your team has 10 games to prove that they're one of the top 64 teams. And then you start the playoffs. You cut down on injuries. You cut down on wasted money on travel. You cut down on neutral site games that go into the hands of, again, other cities. And of course, teams split the gate or whatever. But you're putting yourself in a situation where any conference can go ahead and have teams in. You don't have to worry about the Houstons of the world pleading to join the Big 12, pleading to join the ACC or the Pac-12, whatever conference they can get into, because they can make the playoffs every year. Boise State can finally make some noise. So I don't know. I think that's something that it could come up this year. Rick, I'll let you jump in here. What are your thoughts on that?
I did hear the Mike Leach comments, and if this goes back to one of my arguments, and it's going to go into my final point, was corporate greed in sports. And I think I would love to see the 64, but it's all about money. Especially when Penn State wasn't that good and they made the Penn Stripe Bowl. The New York Yankees and everybody was happy in New York because they knew all the Penn State fans would go travel to New York City, take cars because it's only like a 4-hour drive from State College to New York City and go there. And it's all about money. That's the bad part and that's why you would put Notre Dame in the Final Four again if they may win out and don't have another loss is because about money, because Notre Dame fans will travel wherever it is. I remember they played Pitt 5 years ago. One of the few times that Pitt sold out Heinz Field was against Notre Dame because Notre Dame fans sold the place out. I mean, it's that easy. But here's the thing. Here's Notre Dame's problem. Rest of the schedule. NC State home. Then eventually you go to Miami to play them. You have Navy going. Navy gets to go there. And then you end the year at Stanford. So I don't see them with the one win. I see them losing one of those, remaining 4 games. And it wouldn't surprise me if like a Navy jumps out at you, or Miami's the easy one to pick because you go to Miami to play them. You're going to their place where your fans are going to have trouble buying tickets in Miami because Miami fans are going to show up. You got to think about that too, the home field advantage.
Miami hasn't had half a stadium full in like 20 or 2 decades. Matt, what do you think about that?
I think Miami fans.
Miami's not going to show up. They don't even show up for the Florida State game.
But I think when you're looking at where Miami's heading, and with all the tacky jewelry and things that they're having, they're going to start bringing the people in. When you start putting a winning product out there, I mean, they're vying for contention for the ACC championship on that side. It definitely is going to help sort things out as far as the playoff is concerned. The one thing that you were saying about the injuries, if you expand the playoff format, the thing that I would worry though, if you're only playing 10 games and then these guys are only playing 10 games and they're on a limited work schedule and then they're transitioning into the NFL where there's the 16 game schedule plus playoffs, how many more injuries are you going to see down the road by having them shorten the number of games on that side and then having them go the full NFL schedule, because the wear and tear once they hit the professional level is going to be a lot more. I can understand where at the college level reducing the possibility of injuries, but I think if they were to do that at the college level, what you would see in the professional level, they're already saying rookies late in the year struggle with staying conditioned, staying focused, because they're used to the long layoff between when the regular season ends and when the bowl season happens, where they get back into the swing of things. I think you'll kind of see that trend happening even more, if not on a worse scale, if you cut down the number of games that they're playing, and then they're being forced at the highest level to play more games. It could possibly end up leading where you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. You may see more injuries in the NFL of star players because they're not accustomed to that kind of workload and that volume, in the next step up.
Well, I'm going to use that to transition into our next topic, which is Penn State, Michigan, which happened over the weekend. And to your point, I think when you make that switch, yes, the NFL, it's a grueling product. Whatever. But at that point, these guys are professionals. The NCAA, first and foremost, has to protect themselves. They're already coming under scrutiny because of the UNC decision, and they still have 2 lawsuits pending from athletes who, the Rashad McCants, now he can come in and say to the NCAA, because he was the UNC player that actually broke this back in the day, and then someone else tweeted about having fake classes or whatever. I forget who that was, Henderson maybe in 2009. But McCants complained, and he wanted to sue the NCAA for not having something to fall back on. Then you have guys who weren't represented in video games or whatever, merchandise not getting sold. And then there were some other ones who got hurt, I think, and they're trying to get in. And that's where the NCAA is going to have to draw the line. And I really don't think it would hurt that much because most of the draft picks are from the top programs. And that's why I transitioned to this. So you looked at Michigan on Saturday. It was close at halftime. And they looked overwhelmed in the second half because what happened is you have depth that's young. You have all young depth because they had 11 draft picks in the NFL. Now, in this scenario with a 64 team playoff, you play the 10 games and then you're going to play 3 or 4 extra games. So instead of only playing like 12 games, having that long break into January, now you're not getting those extra weeks off. Because I think under his system, your playoffs are going to continue right after that 10th week, or even if it's 11 games. I forget what the old schedule was. So you're playing consistently, and then you have a 2-week off before the national championship game or the Final Four or whatever. And then I think he said that, I forget, he worked it all out. Look it up. Some other people put together the math. Maybe we'll do our own version and put it up on Twitter. But basically, you're not going to have that huge layoff where a lot of kids do lose conditioning, and then you have bowl games where people are out of practice. Some of the stars are going to start laying off. Happened last year with McCaffrey, and I think Fournette took the bowl game off. When these players start skipping the bowl games, they're gone. What sponsor is going to pay when they don't know if the stars are going to be there? Because ratings are going to drop. So now you have a system where it's rewarding the top teams. The team most likely in the NFL or in the national championship or the Final Four or Elite Eight even are going to have the bulk of those draft picks. Those guys are now playing more intense games later on in the year. They're not half-assing it in some potato chip bowl in Alabama in the middle of whatever. And I think someone brought up, I think it was Rick maybe, about the neutral site. And I'll let you jump back in on this Penn State thing. But the neutral site, you can have that based on regionals in the playoffs. Maybe not the first round. The first round of the playoffs, if you're doing this, should be at the home campus, kind of a reward, maybe the second round too. But then you start to do like a regional game, just like the NCAA tournament in basketball. So maybe you still have that Northeast region play in the Yankee Stadium. So it doesn't matter. That's going to be more of a draw for them and more television eyes than a bowl game against like a Penn State, because then you're lucking out. Because I want to say the one year, maybe it was like Iowa State or someone, they brought in and they were complaining that they didn't get the viewers that they wanted. They didn't get the attendance, or I think they had the attendance, but they didn't get the eyeballs on TV that they wanted where they make most of their money. If it's a playoff game, people will be watching. People are already complaining about not being able to watch the playoffs on New Year's Eve. So something's going to change, and it might happen this year. And of course, it's the NCAA, so it will take 8 years to implement. So we'll miss a lot of good football. I don't think it will be this drastic, but I do think you see the playoffs expand. I know a lot of people are against it, but maybe they do cut one of those games. I don't know. You also have the conference championship game, which I don't know if that would get eliminated under this system. Something to ponder. But back to the game. Saturday night, Michigan came out. I never thought I'd say this, but Don Brown, his game plan was disappointing. He made the adjustments in the second quarter. So Penn State looked really dominant. Right off the bat, if you're not familiar with college football, most programs come out with like a scripted set of plays, whether it's 5 to 10. They have a script where they know based on what's happening, these are the plays we're going to run. So Penn State runs theirs to perfection. I think they scored their first 2 drives on quick scores. And the announcers were saying like, hey, those were trick plays. I think the one guy's like, I've never seen them run that play like that. I think one was a direct snap trick play. You have to be ready for it because you're going to run that first off the bat. They give it up. Michigan was playing man, undermatched. And that's where I think you see elite NFL players jumping to the pros like Jabril Peppers. He shadowed Saquon Barkley last year, Saquon Barkley, and was able to shut him down. I think he held him to 59 yards rushing and something similar to passing, but he was kind of a hybrid cornerback / safety / linebacker, and he's able to do that. This year, Michigan tried to do it, and they couldn't keep up. He dropped the wide open pass. That's the only knock on him that I saw during the game, was that his hands didn't seem to be there. He bobbled a few passes. I haven't seen him catch a lot of balls out of the backfield to know if that's a standing problem. But from an NFL perspective, he looked like he's going to be a solid running back. He sees the holes. He's able to exploit matchups. McSorley did a good job with that as well. And Penn State looked dominant. Me and Rick were talking right before the show. The big game this week is going to be Ohio State, Penn State. And I think if you're looking at it, Penn State's undefeated. Even if they lose, now you have another headache for the playoff committee, because Penn State could be sitting there with 1 loss. It could be the exact opposite of what happened last year. Ohio State, they have the 2 losses. They get into the Big Ten championship game. I've stated before on the show, there are 5 teams And a sixth, if you throw in USC because of the LA market, Notre Dame's not getting left out if they're close. Texas, Michigan, Ohio State, and Alabama. If those 5 teams are close to the playoffs, they're getting in. You've seen it with Ohio State. Usually Ohio State and Michigan kind of eliminate each other. One of them, if they're close, is going to get in. Ohio State jumped Penn State last year. Was held scoreless. Will it happen again? Very impressed with Penn State's team. I wouldn't be surprised if they won out. And that would seal up one of the playoff spots. I know they'd have to play Wisconsin, who's undefeated right now. A lot of people overlook them because they're in the West. But the Big Ten's looking to be a conference where right now even Michigan State's only loss is to that Notre Dame team. So there could be 4 teams. Michigan's probably eliminated. So 3 teams in the East right now that could be beating each other up. I don't know how that's going to shake out. And the Georgia-Notre Dame situation with Alabama isn't looking any better. But Rick, what were your thoughts on the Penn State game? I know you're a Penn State guy. Give me trash talk after the first play of the game on Saturday.
Yeah, pretty much. I was already calling the victory. So, but here's the thing: Barkley is definitely an NFL player. Teams have not really figured him out again this year. Some teams do, and the thing is, you got to have a top line defense to stop them because they'll set up the play action. McSorley will run for like 7 yards randomly, then do it again to you. And that's the thing. They have this constant offense that's moving and everything. And I know we mentioned it before, but Moorhead's got to be when you start firing the college coaches here in a couple of weeks, Moorhead's got to be mentioned or got to be thought about. Is he going to go or not? That's another question. I think if the offer's right and the big money's right, I think he goes. But does he? Or does even teams consider him? The thing is with Penn State is their second half is unbelievable, and I'll give Franklin credit there. They always put together like a game plan for the first half and then a game plan for the second half. They're like, we saw what you did. Now we're going to do this, which is a little bit different, and you're not going to figure it out, and we're going to beat you again. So, I mean, that's what helped them a lot last year, and I think that's what helps them this year is they were a team last year, didn't play, where Michigan and Ohio State blew out so many opponents last year where they were playing the backup. Penn State pretty much had to play everybody through every game because they were blowing teams out, really. They were in a lot of their games until, late third, early fourth because they had to keep playing because they weren't winning big or had to come from behind victories or different things like that. But the one thing that does scare me is you lose this game either to Ohio State or Michigan. Wisconsin looks like your best Big Ten team just because of record, but they're not. It's the East. West is ridiculously weak this year. East is ridiculously strong this year. But the thing is, and according to Vegas odds, 7 points are going to Ohio State since it's a home game. So surprised there that the number 6 is favored to beat the number 2 in the country. But we'll wait to see. I will say this, Meyer does know how to play Penn State. So he has had victories, and he's very good. So I think it's going to be a good game. I still call Penn State maybe by a field goal at the end or something like that. Second half team.
I think that the game on Saturday, basically you've kind of seen how to shut down Penn State. It's to play sort of that zone man, the bend but don't break. You saw Iowa do it. Iowa's been playing that defense for years. Penn State, the one thing that concerns me going forward is they started last year relying on their ability of their tall receivers, their tall tight ends to win jump balls. And the Wisconsin game was the big one, the Big Ten Championship. They got down, and they took a lot of jump balls to get back into it. USC did the same thing. When you're playing man on defense, you're going to be in a lot of bad spots. You saw Michigan do that. And what was head-scratching to me is they made the adjustments in the second quarter, and by the end, right before halftime, and Michigan jumped back in the game. I think it was 14-13 at that point. They missed the extra point. But it felt like Michigan was starting to have momentum. And then what happened, right before half, they switched back to man. Penn State was able to get a couple of those jump balls. And in the second half, they started the same exact thing, back out man. They got away from the zone, which I think if they would have stuck to the zone, they might not have won because Penn State looked like they were a veteran team. And to your point, Rick, that's probably true because they did play a lot of these guys last year. So they have the veteran experience, and that's what's going to have to help them against Ohio State. But if a team stays in that zone like Iowa did, it's going to be a battle every game. And whenever you're going up against, like once they switched into that, they didn't have the athletes or the edge to catch those jump balls against Michigan. And you know they're not going to have the edge against Ohio State. And I would believe that Urban Meyer is going to watch that game film and say, okay, they have Greg Schiano. I think he's their defensive coordinator. I could be wrong. He was a coach at Penn State. So he's going to come out and they're going to say, okay, this is what worked. You don't even have to blitz them because Michigan's blitzes, they weren't just getting there. They were close. A lot of times there were a couple plays where it looked like they were going to get a sack and they just weren't able to get it done. Penn State's line definitely stepped up. That was one of their weak points going into this game where it looked like they could give up a lot of sacks, but they held just enough to get McSorley enough time to throw the ball up. And if a team plays zone, that's where they're going to be in trouble. You saw Wisconsin get away from it last year, which allowed them to come back. They sat back. They just need to have the safeties double the outside guys. Double Gesicki and whoever their receiver was. Like his name's escaping me right now. But that's what I noticed in the game. That's the formula. I would like to get your thoughts on that, Matt, since you're a football coach. Did you watch a game? What did you think of that game?
I did watch it, and I was surprised that Penn State pulled away the way that they did in the second half. I thought, for me, the thing that's always been kind of a sticking point watching Penn State is that as soon as you leave them for dead, as soon as you think, all right, well, there's no way they're coming back, they start hitting some of these splash plays. And I think when you're the kind of team that relies on splash plays for your momentum, you live by the sword and you die by the sword. And I think you see that in some of those games like with Iowa. They almost ended up losing it because of that bend but don't break defensive mentality. But in games like that, it looks rough, but then you have like the Big Ten championship last year. They're throwing the ball and it looked like a backyard football game where McSorley's just dropping back and just throwing it as high and deep as he can and letting guys you want to just scream at the TV, like just knock it down. But kudos to those players for jumping up and making those plays. To me, one of the things that I'm kind of curious about is the way that they use Barkley, because at times, he's definitely the man. He's the guy that you want to try to figure out as an offensive coordinator. You want to think, how can I get the ball into the hands of my best player the most amount of times? And with some of the games, it feels like they're limiting the touches that Barkley has. It's almost like I don't know what they're saving him for, or if it's like there's an injury or something that they're trying to keep hidden, that we're going to limit him or only use him during times that we need him. But I wonder if that's going to come back to bite them, because if you're using it in terms of, I'm going to rest him for a big game, like a Michigan game, like an Ohio State game, I'm going to save him for these times. And then you'd really truly find yourself in a dogfight if he has, I compare that to some high school programs that if you're constantly beating your teams and pulling your starters at halftime and they're not used to playing four quarters, when they actually get into a tough game and they have to find that edge in the fourth quarter, do they have enough gas in the tank to really pull through when they need to? I think that it's to be determined at this point, because you really haven't seen at times where they're using him to the full extent. I definitely think Don Brown's mentality going into it was make somebody else jump, beat us. It was fully, anytime Barkley was running, all the linebackers were chasing him. I think the game plan turned out to be, if anyone else beats us, then so be it. But we're not going to let Barkley be the one to run up and down the field on us. They hit on a lot of the splash plays and got some other players involved, and I think that's where you saw the game pull away from where it is. I think the one other question on the Michigan side is if they struggle versus Ohio State, with this being year 3 for Harbaugh struggling to beat Urban Meyer, does that put him? I know we've kind of touched on this before. Does that put a little bit of heat on him? Because I'm sure some of those big money boosters aren't going to take lightly losing to Ohio State 3 years in a row.
Well, I'll use that as a transition here. to end our college football segment. But I'll answer that question. Right now, I'm hearing conflicting things from a couple sources I have at Michigan on the team. Now, everyone knew that the team was going to be young this year. I just think because of how great Harbaugh's been, that it's kind of bumped expectations through the roof. And you can't knock it. It was the first time Michigan won back-to-back double-digit wins in seasons since like 2002, 2003, I think. Maybe 2003, 2004. So even whenever they were number 2 in 2006, like they didn't follow that season up with double-digit wins. They didn't have the season before. So now you're having expectations through the roof. You've had awesome recruiting classes, but I think the problem is with comparing his third year to other teams' third years is when Hoke started to fall off, recruiting got really bad. And then because of all the media hype, with Harbaugh not really coming to Michigan, even though he said he was, that recruiting class ended up being very small. So right now you're having your best players as basically sophomores and freshmen. The other thing, and I hate speculating about players, is the quarterback situation. You basically had your starting quarterback get hurt, broken neck, he's out, and you have a backup who was a transfer. He kind of got thrown away at Houston. He's come in, he's played to the best of his ability, but that's probably his ceiling. He's probably more of that second-tier player. He could succeed at another school similar to Houston, and he's thrown into the game here. I think the biggest question mark is coming out of the Harbaugh camp is the way he came in. He's been very fiery. I mentioned off the show to Rick earlier, I think he's definitely toned it down. He knows it seems like the refs are out to get him. It seems like the AP voters are out to get him. And this is just looking at the product on the field. If you're looking at two lost teams, there's no way Michigan should have fell out of the rankings after the Penn State loss. Penn State was the number 2 team. I mean, you have other teams in the rankings like LSU that lost to Troy. You can't tell me that Michigan's losses were worse than a loss to Troy. That's embarrassing that these voters are going out there. And I mentioned a couple previously on the show that have called him out publicly, saying that we'll start taking you serious once you start releasing your depth charts or other things like that. He's going to have to play ball. I honestly think, looking at it, that is why Urban Meyer left Florida. It was a genius move. He took a year off to join the media, and he became friends with all these guys. I mean, they still show his highlights from game day. If you watch College Game Day, they'll show old Urban Meyer clips. You can't tell me that doesn't resonate with the thing. So his personality is going to be the thing. I don't think it's going to be boosters really pushing him out. I think he's starting to show it on the sideline. He didn't really argue much. He did a lot more teaching than what would have happened last year. Last year, he would have been throwing stuff on the sideline. You didn't see it. So I think it's going to start to come around where he's going to start to play ball. I don't think he's going to get any pressure after this year. The one thing that I'm hearing is that he possibly missed on that quarterback recruit when he first started. And if that's a miss, I think I mentioned it before, all expectations are going to come into next year because I've heard he doesn't want to burn the red shirt on Christian McCaffrey's brother. If he doesn't burn that red shirt, that means that this quarterback season, I don't think it's called like a toss away, but that means that the other guy he recruited, Peters, isn't going to play. If Peters doesn't play this week at Rutgers or at home against Rutgers, then, I mean, I just don't see him beating McCaffrey out next year. And I think Harbaugh goes to bat with a redshirt freshman leading what should be a strong returning cast. And so next year will be the year where if this happens again, things fall off, then I could see him start to build pressure. But I think a lot of fans are just frustrated he hasn't had a backup quarterback that he recruited ready to go. I think that's where most of the frustration's coming from. And I've heard conflicting things. The rumors are either that he was going to start, but because of the way the schedule worked out, you never throw a rookie quarterback into a whiteout game at Penn State, which makes sense because he could be busted from that. Or he's just a bust overall. So we'll see on Saturday. I don't want to throw kids' names under the bus about them being busts or not based on scouts that are just watching practice. But that will be very telling. If he doesn't get a go-around and they keep rolling out O'Korn, who's throwing, 50%, 140 yards through the air a game. That just doesn't make it at a big-time program. And I mean, I love the kid's heart. He's out there battling every play. But at some point, Harbaugh has to build for the future. If he doesn't do that, there will be questions. And yes, you're right. That Ohio State game might be another bloodbath like 2 years ago. So it'll be interesting to see. Moving on, we'll see what happens with Penn State and the Big Ten. This is a huge game for them. I think they definitely cover. That's a 6-point or 7-point line that Rick said. I think they cover. Ohio State needs to win big, though, if they want to make a splash in the playoffs, because they need a big win like Penn State had over Michigan. Looks great for Ohio State since they already have that loss. I just think Penn State has enough veteran leadership that's not going to happen. Now on to the Steelers. Steelers beat the Bengals over the weekend. Pretty sure that's who they played. I watched the game. They're having some of their own internal troubles. So I'll start with that. Martavis Bryant, I don't know if you guys saw this. He's been pointing out that he's done. Like, he doesn't want to do with like his contract or whatever if they're not going to pay him. And he said he's ready to walk. He'll play out the rest of his contract because he can't support his family on that, which I looked through the numbers. I think he's making $500,000 and he signed a signing bonus. So I think you will get that right at the beginning of the season or whenever you sign, worth almost $200,000. And I understand his frustration, but to me, he doesn't deserve that top money. You have Antonio Brown getting most of the catches. Juju Smith has been coming on strong. And you have another locker room case, which has been my complaint with the Steelers this year. If they ruin the season because of in-locker room fighting, I'm going to be so disappointed. Because it's pointing like it's going to be Ben's last year. I mean, I think you've seen that. He's going through cycles. He kind of looks like he's lost a lot of touch on the ball. There were a couple throws on the game on Sunday where it looked like they were going to be intercepted because he didn't have the strength behind him. And it was old throws where he would have completed them. I remember one clearly, it was an out to, I think it was Brown. He threw it. He was wide open. And by the time the ball got there, the defender was already jumping the route. I forget what quarter it was, but it was coming towards the bottom of the screen on the TV. And to me, that's shocking that it's happening because it's only, I don't even think it's midway through the season. It's getting there. But if he's losing velocity now, when playoffs come, it could be pretty rough. And the one thing you definitely don't want, if you need to be on the same page with your receivers because you're losing arm strength, it's in locker room fighting. So this is something that needs to be squashed immediately. And I'll give it up now. You guys can do some talking since I've been talking for a little bit here. But Matt, what are your thoughts on the NFL this weekend and the Steelers stuff?
The Steelers stuff, I mean, it's the same old thing. That it's the in-locker room, it's in-house stuff. To me, one of the things that it resonates back to some of the stuff that we talked about with inconsistencies. Vontaze Burfict, the linebacker that just seems to like throw tons of gasoline on this Cincinnati-Pittsburgh rivalry, is kicking players in the head on the field and is not suspended by the league. Like, for all the ticky-tack things that the league comes down on players for, and for it sends the wrong message when they're going to talk about player safety, and then you have a guy doing some nasty stuff and kicking players, and you don't suspend them, you don't fine them, you don't do anything, you just turn a blind eye to it. Is it that the league's trying to take the Steelers down a peg, being a conspiracy theorist? I don't think, but it's just another example where the league's going to pick and choose who they want to let go, who they want to fine, and I just don't think that that's right. As far as the Martavis Bryant thing, it goes back to even some of the stuff with Le'Veon Bell. You want to complain, you want to be a high-value target. Show up, do your job, and shut your mouth, and maybe you can expect to get paid. You look at Mike Wallace. He was one of the ones that demanded tons of money. They turned around because of all the issues he was having. They offered it to Antonio Brown, who at the time was quietly making numbers, producing. I think some of the issues you're seeing with Ben Roethlisberger now is not a result of him wearing out a little bit. I think it's more so the fact that guys are too busy worried about making extra money outside of practice. They're not working on routes. Their chemistry is off because they're too busy pouting about everything else. And if they can just focus on doing their job, then they run the routes the way they're supposed to be run, and maybe the timing is a little bit better on some of these plays. Things look off because there's too much pouting going on. Just get back to doing what you do best.
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats now. I wanted to bring them up so I didn't sound like an idiot. But Martavis Bryant, he's averaging 33 yards a game. He has 18 receptions on the year. Juju Smith has 17, and Jesse James has 18. So he's basically playing on the level of these other guys, and he's demanding more money. I know that's lower on the scale, but to me, it's just crazy. I don't know. Rick, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't understand how you could demand money when you were doing nothing last year in the NFL. You did nothing. You were suspended all year. And why do you deserve money? Oh, yeah, because you showed up this year. Okay, great. 17 catches. That's almost something. I mean, I don't get it. If the Steelers lose, I know what people are going to do. They're going to point fingers and say, well, Brown's throwing water bottles. Bell held out. Martavis Bryant and his girlfriend love going on Twitter and complaining. That's what high school kids do. They throw tantrums and go on Twitter and complain. Come on. If you're that good, try to go out there and get open and get maybe 10 catches a game. Or do something to help your team out. Because you're eventually going to get, proved. If you're good, you're going to get paid in this league. Now, I'm not surprised Burfict wasn't suspended or paid. I don't think the NFL wants to encourage any suspensions unless you actually do something where somebody else is going to cry more than you. And they had to suspend Lynch because he pretty much just shoved around a referee. So you knew the referee union was going to complain if he didn't get a suspension. So they had to suspend him, especially since they threw him out of the game too. So it wasn't surprising or anything like that. But not surprised that the Steelers are infighting. It's something they continue for the preseason to now. I call it consistency. Congratulations. Congratulations. And here's the thing, too. If Ben retires, I think he's 22 or 24 million he's making this year. So there's technically $24 million sitting out there that if he does retire that you can use under a salary cap to pay people. So maybe Bell gets a contract. Maybe Bryant does. Well, it depends really on the rest of the season. So if Bell gets hurt and Bryant stinks, there's $24 million. You could go buy a new quarterback, wide receiver, and running back with now in this NFL. So do you need it? And you still have your first round pick too that you can use it on for the future. So not surprised that they're still in group fighting at all. NFL, nothing really big I thought happened this week. A lot of what was expected did happen. But congratulations to Matt's Rams, by the way. Matt's Rams, huge win against Arizona. Arizona, thanks for showing up. You didn't put a point on the board. But the Rams put 33 on the board. And Bruce Arians at the end of the game looked like he was going to cry because that was pathetic. Well, they lost Carson Palmer for the third consecutive year. And Drew Stanton still proves to me that he has an NFL contract in place at the end of games when Carson Palmer's injured. So congratulations, Drew Stanton. You still have an NFL contract. But the Rams look like the real deal. And here's how they win. Defense. Who would expect that topic? We don't have a high. They have some good offensive weapons, but they have a very, very good defense. So kudos to them. So.
Well, I think there's a rumor on that. They were saying that Arians might be pushed out or he might be done. Something's going on there. I think I just saw before the show started that was squashed, though. But with that, yeah, the NFC West, Rams, Matt, your pick's doing well. But there's no surprise out there with the 49ers getting destroyed by the Cowboys. One of the franchises that used to be so proud is now just a laughingstock. That used to be, I saw, the reason I brought that up is the NFL was like they do their commercials each week, which some of them they do so far in advance that I'm so confused on who's playing when. They've been advertising the Chiefs Raiders game for like 3 weeks now, it seems like. And I mean, I rarely watch television, but that game finally happened. I wanted to use that as a reminder because that's my last point on the NFL this week. But they were talking about this 49ers Cowboy matchup, which if anyone watched it, it was an embarrassment. 49ers, I mean, they've been playing teams close, but that team is nowhere near ready to compete. And for them to have like premier matchups, I just think there's a lot of garbage games this year. And like I'm watching football games and there's a lot of mistakes, a lot of drop balls. You're having big name guys get hurt. JJ Watt's out. Aaron Rodgers is out. David Johnson's out for basically the year. I mean, you're having top name guys get hurt. The NFL, it's ripe. It's ripe for the picking right there. The Steelers, if they just hold strong, maybe there is some conspiracy where they don't want the Steelers in another playoff because it seems like it's either Tom Brady, who the NFL can't keep down. They've suspended him. They've done everything against the Patriots, and he keeps winning. So I think they've kind of given up that it's going to be the Patriots versus whoever, and I just don't think they want the Steelers. And I watched the Chiefs game, and I think it was, I could have my offense-defensive wrong because it was a Thursday night game, which I hate Thursday night games. But I think it was, who won that game? Was it the Raiders? They had like 4 chances to score at the end of that game. I'm going to look it up.
Was it Kansas City played that?
Yeah, it was Kansas City Chiefs.
Raiders won 31-30.
Yeah. So at the end of the game, the Raiders are coming back. They keep calling pass interference on the Chiefs. Pass interference, holding. Move them up 5 yards. Holding. Okay, time's out of the game, but there's another penalty, so it's an on-time down. I think they did that like once or twice. It was unbelievable how many chances they got at the end of the game. People complain about how long the games are, how many commercials they're squeezing in, but now you're extending the game. I understand, like, yeah, there might be a penalty, but like 3 or 4 penalties in a row. Andy Reid's face was just, he couldn't even speak. Like, they zoomed in on him. He just standing there with like his mouth wide open. Like, what is going on? And of course the Chiefs lose, but why would the NFL want the Chiefs to win? They're a boring team. They're playing sound football. They're getting the job done. They're not flashy. They're not celebrating. They have basically, I mean, some of the stars, people should know Alex Smith because of his run with the 49ers. But other than that, it's a lot of rookies, a lot of no-name, quiet guys besides Tyreek Hill, who had his run-in with the law or whatever he went through. Eric Berry's out, who would have been their star on defense. But other than that, they're just a fundamentally sound football team that's winning games. And now you have the Raiders, who everyone loves because of their mascot, because of their marketing back in the 80s. They have nationwide fans. It just seemed a little fishy that there were a lot of flags at that end of the game to make that or the AFC West standings a little bit closer. Because when the Steelers beat them, it seemed like now there's a chance, and that's a little conspiracy there. I know, heavy on the conspiracies this week. But at the one point, going back to the World Series, I forgot, even more so than the Hurricane, isn't Verlander dating Kate Upton? I've seen her come back in, and you know that's huge marketing for the MLB. They're licking their chops because young boys and young girls are going to be watching now because I think she's a model or something. I don't even know what she does. But that's another conspiracy. Got to get those guys out. They just announced Justin Timberlake, the one NFL game I'm watching. I had guests over, so of course we had the sound on because if you're watching a game in the silent and you just hear me ranting, I don't want to scare away my guests. So I had the sound on, and you guys know I've talked about on the show, I haven't been doing that. The whole time they talked about Justin Timberlake's halftime performance for the Super Bowl. I forget what game it was. And it just made me just shake my head. Like they announced it during the game. Maybe it was Sunday night or Monday night. I don't even remember which game I watched. But to me, that's all trying to get back their viewers. We'll bring back in Justin Timberlake. Ratings are falling. Let's try to do something here. Let's talk about this to try to get other people to tune in. I saw it like trending on Twitter immediately. JT's back. I think, was he the guy that did the Janus?
Yes.
Michael Jackson sisters thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then that was up.
Jackson.
Now you're bringing the NFL back into the news cycles because everyone was talking about that over the weekend. Oh, I wonder what's going to happen this year. Is he going to have another female performer with her? Blah, 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 blah. Anything but football seems to be what they're doing. So that's it for football for me. If you guys have anything else, you can bring it up here, but I just wanted to touch on the Penguins. I know I was a little nervous at they lost that game by like 10 goals or whatever to the Blackhawks early on, but they've been playing well. And it's looking like they are going to have a run. They're sitting in second place again in their division, not in the conference. I think Right now, they'd be third or fourth if the playoffs were around or something like that overall, because the other division has some overall top teams. But right now, the Penguins seem to be starting strong. I'm very confident in them going forward. Again, they're a veteran team. I'm just hoping that they cruise through this first part of the season, get some guys some rest, get some young guys some reps, see what happens, win a few games, and go strong with that. NHL, though, nothing really beside the Vegas team. Vegas has the best start of any expansion team or new franchise in NHL history, which there's been a lot because I think they only had 6 teams to start, or 8 teams at the beginning of the NHL. 6. So they go through, and they've been going, and I think that's been 50 years? They've had 22 teams? 21? I don't even know how many total. I'm trying to do math as I explain this, but Vegas has the top teams overall. So good for them. I know we talked about them getting a lot of good veteran players. The way the draft shakes out now, I'm not sure how in past seasons how that would have worked on how teams would have built their thing. But that's it for the week. We did have a question come through. Did anyone talk about the Marcus Peters suspension? But I'll give that a look up. You guys can go through and do your final thoughts, or if you want to talk about NHL or some more of the NFL stuff, feel free. We'll start with you, Matt. What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the things that I noticed in following Arizona a little bit, just because of Rich Rod, I always found his offenses and the way that he became interesting. He, due to some injuries and having to play some different guys, has a throwback style quarterback to the kind that he had when he was at West Virginia. And I think it's something to keep an eye on here over the next couple weeks, because it's starting to look like his offenses of old, where his quarterback was able to make some plays happen with his legs. It was the kind of thing that made me think back that West Virginia, if he doesn't leave and go to Michigan, what could he have possibly accomplished staying with the Mountaineers? So if you happen to staying up late and you have a chance to watch some Arizona, that's going to be some good football. The other thing that I was thinking about, as far as we're into October, the month's almost over, is the emphasis on all this. And I appreciate, with the NFL partnering with, the breast cancer awareness. But I think when it starts to trickle down into some of the younger levels, especially at the high school level, it drives me absolutely crazy to hear special pink shoes and pink visors and pink everything. That I think it gets away from the message of trying to be supportive of the cause, and it puts more attention back on, look at what I bought and the individualized aspects of things, as opposed to being focused on what the team before we were we'd have uniformly have wristbands that would say, all right, here you go, you wear these, and that's, or the combination of wristband and socks, and that's it. There's guys that are going out spending all this extra money on stuff, and that's all I got.
Yeah, that's good. We mentioned that way back when we first started the show. I think maybe in the spring or over the summer, early summer, when I talked about the Major League Baseball uniforms. They go ahead, they put together the special uniforms to try to do some type of marketing. It actually came out that the NFL, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say 14%, but it was reported that less than 14% of the money they raise on those pink jerseys even goes to breast cancer research. So it's all a scam. And then they kind of backtracked, and that might have changed over the years, but do research on that. Definitely, they're only using the pink uniforms as a washout to sell pink uniforms. That's not my opinion, because if they were giving 100% of the proceeds to cancer research, then they could say that in their defense that no, they're using it to raise cancer. They're using it, they say, awareness. They're not helping fund the research. Their thing is cancer awareness. How many people just casually flipping through the TV, oh, why is that guy wearing pink? How many people, unless you watch every single NFL game is going to know that that's even for cancer research anymore. It's not like they have the big ribbon symbols on there, because that's a no-no. That's against the rules. You can't have any symbols or anything. You're just going to wear the color pink. To me, it's all about selling uniforms. And yeah, that's a touchy subject. Maybe we should bring that up again and talk more about that at length in another show. But I looked at the thing. I actually didn't see this, but Marcus Peters was testifying in defense of the Marshawn Lynch thing with his suspension pushing the ref. I didn't see any conclusive evidence either way that testifying is going to help. But the NFL just does what they want. We saw it with the Ezekiel Elliott. They went ahead and went to court. It kind of got pushed back, and now the court's saying that the NFL's in their rights or whatever. So he's out, but he can kind of get back in and play. Eventually, it's going to wear out where they're just extending it to the point where it's hard for him to stay in shape. And it's going to be the same thing with Marshawn Lynch. They know he's been, difficult at interviews. So the more this stays in the news, the more they can kind of keep him sidelined. Maybe they extend it, maybe they don't. It's kind of like an unknown just to keep it in the news cycles that, hey, we have Marshawn Lynch. I wonder how many jersey sales he's getting. But either way, I don't think a player testifying, I don't know if they're going to rule on it or when they're going to rule on it. But overall, doesn't matter to me if he's out because I have his backup in fantasy football. So I'll end it on that because I wasn't really going anywhere with that anyway. Rick, what are your thoughts?
Penguins are now in first place. They won today. They beat Edmonton.
Oh, did they? It was 0-0 in the second, I think, when I looked.
Yeah, it was 2-1 Kessel with the game winner. So surprising enough, they are 6-3. I know we talked a little bit of trash on them, but 6-3. I just want to thank Florida Panthers here. Thank you for picking up Nami. He's awful. I don't know why you would want him. I'd find some guy in the AHL. I'd even look in the ECHL before I look at this guy. Because you got to pay him the $700,000 or whatever. Subtract the 3 game checks or whatever he made. But he's awful. I think his career is finally over. Again, why we saw Ben Bishop was signed. But here's the thing. In their conference, which is the Metropolitan, which doesn't make sense of that word, Washington's not as good because they've lost some guys to free agency. New York Rangers are just old. They're older than us, actually, taking the ice. Carolina's way too young. Jordan Stahl is actually their captain of all things. So you're seeing teams that are decreasing in talent in the Penguins division. I think it's going to help them out. But the problem is the other division, which is Tampa Bay looks great. Toronto looks great. Detroit's even looked like they've had some, they're putting together some young guys to make a run here. So it looks like that side of their Eastern Conference is getting better, whereas the Metropolitan Division is looking like they're getting worse in a hurry. So my second point is Joe Thomas is now his consecutive streak is done. Future's in question. Does he retire or not? Could we actually say Cleveland Browns Hall of Famer? Cleveland Browns Hall of Famer. Seems redundant, but this guy's got a shot with all of his Pro Bowls, even though Cleveland Browns are just awful and still don't have a win. And to go back to your point of breast cancer, I know we mentioned it before, it's all about money. And that's why I think I've learned, I would say this year, we're, thinking about everything. It's all about money in sports. NFL's down 18% in fans since 2015 to their first 6 weeks. In 2 years, they've lost 18% of their fans. They have to change their rules. Minor League Baseball is down in, fans. All these, they already have teams that are releasing promotional schedules already in minor leagues. That was never a thing until February to release them. They're already releasing them now. This is all about money and everything. The Atlantic League, which I talk about, Bridgeport Bluefish, they ceased operations. They don't have money to continue playing, that they're going to have to choose a team that plays every away game right now. They don't have a home. They're going to live out of hotels and play a game. These guys are just going to get on a bus, go play the game, go back to a hotel, get back on a bus. They're never going to have a home. So it's weird things that are happening in sports, especially coming this year. But when you look at it, it's all about money. Figure out where it goes. 3 business degrees helped me prove that theory, that it's all about money. So that's why the players went with those stupid name jerseys on the back in MLB, trying to sell those. That was stupid. tell me, oh, I really wanted to buy that jersey that said Kutch on the back. Nerf. He's great. Have fun with that when he's traded next year to some team like Dodgers, because they need an outfielder, So, yeah, so have fun with that. I don't understand it. Money, money, money. It's a $150 jersey. I'd say buy it on eBay and you can get it cheaper. Go ahead. I'm done.
Well, Rick, you had a lot of good points there, man. And now give me a good starting point for ending the show. The jersey thing, first off, I heard that a lot of teams vetoed the name choice, and they went ahead and rewrote the names into some more common things, probably to help push sales. I mean, you pick the nicknames. They're like, well, that's not appropriate here. We wanted you to use this one. I've heard players were pushed into that, and that's from players directly. I don't remember who, but a couple players complained, and of course
players
they were deleted.
Made players switch names too.
Yeah.
On purpose, because some players there were jokes in there and other things, they made them switch to other things.
Yeah, and that's for the money. The second thing, the Joe Thomas thing, I actually had a note to bring it up in the offseason because there's too much stuff in the season to talk about this. But I saw an article about how he was using the same cupping techniques to stay healthy throughout his career, and that's why he had never missed a game. So I had a note to bring that up in the offseason. And now it didn't work, and I actually looked for the articles. They've been deleted. So I couldn't find, I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure people can find them, but they did this PR push. I think it was through the Cleveland Browns where they were bragging about how he was using Chinese medicine and something for diversity or something, to awareness to extend his career. And now I couldn't find them. Some of the points I had links saved from before. I don't know when they pushed them out. It was a month ago maybe. But if you're doing research, I thought that was kind of funny that they just kind of gave up on that because he got hurt. They're like, forget about that. And I'll end with your NHL point. You talked about injury. Going back to my Julio Franco vet of the year, we could also have one for Jaromir Jagr, who got hurt and maybe could be his final days. But as a Pittsburgh Penguin, he was an awesome player. He still played. I think he signed with the Flames this year.
Flames.
They brought him back. He will be the name. If we do the vet of the year for the NHL, we'll have to use Jaromir Jagr. Maybe I'll look through and see if there's anyone else who has performed at a high level that have been that old. But I would imagine not, because he's like a timeless hero. But we'll end with that. Make sure you subscribe. Tell your friends. We're trying to grow, expand. If you want to, we would appreciate if you leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn. I believe we're on all of those. And follow us on social media, Southbound Sports on Facebook and Instagram, and S-Bound Sports on Twitter. You can go ahead and give us a call if you have any feedback. If you're still listening now, I need to plug the number earlier in the show. But our number is 412-330-1512. Give us some hot takes. I'm going to try to get some other people either calling in or giving thoughts soon in the show. Once the studio's put together, that'll be a little bit easier for me. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you guys next week.